Jake, welcome to the Expert Circle podcast. I've had a couple of bros on that had majestic beards, but yours is in the running here for the top spot. So I'm
Nice.
excited to have you on. Yeah, look forward to hearing about Kite in a Tree and your journey, getting started there in the Boise, Idaho area. So yeah, welcome on and tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got started, and we go from there.
All right. Well, I started in doing tree work for the city of Pocatello over in East Idaho. I started working for Parks and Rec over there, doing just basic park tree maintenance, things like that. Working, climbing, doing bucket work, things like that. I did that for a couple of years, and then I did some work for Davy, doing utility line clearance. For those who might not know, it's similar to Asplund or I also worked for Trees Incorporated, all utility line clearance. So that was a pretty fun job, but I wasn't really into it, mainly because of the end result is really ugly. I realized that I wanted to be more in the kind of tree preservation and tree care side rather than just doing utility clearance and stuff like that. Again, obviously it's a very necessary thing doing utility clearance, but just not my bags. Um, so then I moved over to Boise in early 2000s and kind of bounced around here and there trying to figure out what I wanted to actually be when I grew up. And after a few years doing a bunch of other stuff, decided that tree work was kind of the only thing that I couldn't really remember a really horrible day where it was just like I never want to do this again. I had hard days and everything, but never a day where I just absolutely hated the work. So I decided to kind of dive back into it and worked for a tree and landscape company for a little while. Well, actually, about 3 years. The safety standards there were, I guess, to put it gently, questionable. So I decided to move on to a smaller private company in Boise. Worked there for a couple of years. The owner there helped me get my certified arborist. And about a year after I got that, I started my own business, Kite in a Tree. And it was great because he was really supportive. He's one of those guys that doesn't want to keep employees where they are. He wants them to grow and actually, really get involved in tree work. And so I was fortunate that he was really supportive of me starting my own business. And he even sent me a few of his clients to kind of help get me going. And
Wow.
from there, it's just taken off, and I've gotten um, a lot more into just outside of the pruning aspect, but also getting into actual soil work and things like that, which is just the soil is just as important as the tree is. So really started delving into soil work and small tree pruning, plantings, things like that. So, and I, about a year and a half ago, started another business from the ground up, which is more of an educational entity. So I do a lot of public education and classes for master gardeners and things like that. So it's kind of evolved into a bit more of an education aspect, but I'm still doing a lot of the physical part of it as well.
Wow, so many cool things to touch on there. Um, I mean, first, I'd love to ask you about, just there was something inside of you that, felt like expressing the artistry of taking care of trees. A lot of the tree guys I, speak with, we don't always get into this, but I feel like there is a number of guys that are kind of connected to nature and have this connection in them, and they don't want to do a corporate 9 to 5 job in some
Yeah.
cubicle. They like,
Yeah.
there's something
Absolutely.
in them that wants to be, connected to that. So, I mean, it takes interesting person. I think a lot of people that have that inside of them are drawn to trees. A lot of people are maybe just a little bit crazy, drawn to tree work, it's a dangerous job, and they're like,
And,
willing to take
yeah.
on risks, and they like the adventure of that. That probably takes a little bit of a person that's in some ways too methodical and good at, dealing with all the safety aspects of that. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about just the character and nature of a tree guy and what it takes to be successful there, and maybe those three different aspects and how, you juggle that.
Yeah, well, there's a huge safety component to it. I feel like it's something, unfortunately, that's really lacking. There's plenty of industry standards that tell us, how to work safely, and just basic protective gear and things like that, helmets and safety glasses, ear protection. And I just see all over our valley, and I know it happens everywhere, but I see just driving around, trees that are people that are working under trees and there's no head protection on. And it's hard to watch because I read statistics, and I'm not a huge statistics guy. I don't spend hours and hours pouring through them, but I like to keep up on them, because it is one of the most dangerous industries in the world, and we have a pretty high death rate, a pretty high significant or severe injury rate, even compared to law enforcement, firefighters, things like that. I definitely, I bring that up kind of gingerly because I never want to compare myself to law enforcement, because I feel like every time, anytime any of us steps out into our workplace, we've got a certain inherent danger aspect to it. But no, and that's part of the reason I really got out of really big trees and things like that, just because that level of potential issues goes up dramatically the more kind of aggressive work you're doing. And I just, I kind of had the heart for it for a little while, but I just, it just kind of wasn't really my thing. So, but even just a small 2-inch branch coming down and ringing you in the head, it's gonna hurt. It's probably not gonna kill you, but it's gonna hurt pretty bad. And then if you're working at any height, there are statistics about significant injuries from falls, and they usually happen, within 10 feet from the ground. So we're not even talking about, being up in an 80-foot spruce or anything like that. We're talking about just, guys that are up on a ladder and it loses their footing and they fall and break their back, break their hip. Um, and that's not even from a lot of height. So, it's just all these really kind of small things that can really change your whole life really quickly.
Yep,
Um,
yep,
I work around shippers occasionally. Usually, when I'm working with another company, I just work a truck and a trailer right now, and a compressor when I'm doing soil work. So, not a lot of inherent danger there. But when I do work with other companies, there's a very, very high vigilance with safety, and being very aware of your surroundings. And you know, there's something as fluke as somebody being pulled into a chipper from a rope laying on the ground gets sucked into the chipper and it wraps around your ankle, or there's just so many little things that can happen. So,
yep, yep,
it's just something that, like I say, I just kind of see it around everywhere, and it just, it kind of breaks my heart that a company owner isn't like, everybody wears helmets, everybody has glasses, everybody has ear protection, and if you don't, you're off the job. But that's not the way it is. So
yep.
it's
Uh,
it's kind of
yep,
heartbreaking to see.
yep. And you mentioned, people in the, police force, and I see, some guys that, maybe were in the service, armed services, and I think you need that kind of militaristic mentality of, hey, I'm going into the line of fire and I'm willing to put myself in harm's way, but at the same time, like, I'm going above and beyond and utilizing a proven checklist to make sure that we mitigate the chances of something not going the right way. So yeah, it's I think very similar, and those are, I think, avid, um and or apt, correlations to draw with people that are putting themselves in harm's way, for police officers or people in the armed services. uh, the other thing that's interesting, so your previous boss that was on purpose, or whatever you wanna call it, setting people up for the next chapter in their journey, becoming
Mhm.
owners, having that abundant philosophy, how did you see that serve him? A lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm losing so many guys. Oh, it's so hard to keep good guys," and that's their
Yeah.
mentality. So, he had a different mentality. How did you see that serve him? And, I imagine you've maybe carried a similar mentality into your, paying it forward into your business, and how have you seen kind of, an abundant mentality in that aspect of training guys up serve you and your business? And has that, you know, been a good thing for you, or you lose a lot of people and it's frustrating, or it you know, it comes around, what you give out comes around and the law of attraction, comes back to you in other ways, or
Yeah. Well, working for him kind of planted that seed of sharing knowledge. I mean, I've always been, somebody that if somebody asks me a question, I don't kind of keep the information to myself. But as a business owner, to encourage your guys to to share and actually um, talk about your education and what an article you just read, or just things like that. That kind of started that, and it kind of encouraged me to have that mentality that I don't. If another tree company calls me and asks me a question, I don't want to keep it to myself and say, "Oh, I'll just, I'll go take care of that client for you." I try to, as best I can, share that and say, "Well, this is how I would approach it." It's not, I'm not the smartest, most well-read tree guy, but I do feel like a few companies reach out to me, and I reach out to them, and we share things, and it's a good community to have because we don't keep all of our secrets to ourselves. We don't try to hoard all the work because there's plenty of it to go around. Um, and I myself don't have any employees. I've worked with a few other small companies in the area and kind of heard the good and the bad from that. And kind of getting back to your point about having kind of a almost a militaristic or very specific way of doing things. That's kind of how I am, and so I would say maybe that is maybe a fault of mine where I like things done a very specific way, and so if I want it done that way, I'll do it that way. Um, and that way I know it was done, at least how I wanted it to be, and hopefully up to standards and all that. Um, but yeah, I don't have employees. Probably don't really plan to have employees, but I feel like if I did, I would really be the same way. I would encourage them. I wouldn't want a guy just being a grunt all the time, because I feel like people, in order to feel valued somewhere, they have to have room for advancement. They have to be encouraged to go to classes and get accreditations and qualifications and I would never want to keep somebody kind of in their place. I would want to make sure that they felt like, what they were doing was important and it wasn't just dragging brush all day long every day for the rest of their life. Um, it's not really conducive, one, to a good workplace because again, you're not going to keep good employees doing that. But also it just helps them, feel important, feel like they're contributing and not just helping, I guess.
yep, yep. So let's talk about your business models. You know, we I ask, a lot of guys, hey, do you go big in terms of wide with your offerings and services and what you do, and scaling and hiring more people, buying more equipment? Are you going narrow and kind of niching down into focusing on one thing? So sounds like you don't do kind of bigger trees, more kind of pruning than bigger stuff, possibly. And that allows you to be, a one man crew, and you don't have to lift huge things and be a little bit more
Hmm.
efficient. Yeah, talk to
Yeah.
me a little bit more about that, and that, approach, how that served you, and why you decided to, end up, in that business model. And yeah, 'cause that's, I think, a decision every
Yeah.
guy has
So
to make, right? But whether they're gonna go wide or niche down and be kind of lean and mean and super efficient.
yeah, I do, yeah, mostly ornamental prunings, just smaller trees. Fruit trees is a big part of my business. That is it's kind of niche to where you only have a certain part of the season to do it. We're looking at like late winter through early spring is kind of the ideal time for that. So that's a really heavy. Well, this is a really heavy time of year for me. Start getting into summer, things slow down. But again, I refer a lot of the bigger tree jobs out to other companies that I have really good relationships with, and just staying out of the situations where I have to have somebody else on, on site helping. whether it's safety reasons or efficiency reasons. Every once in a while, I'll reach out to another couple of companies and say, hey, do you have a guy available this day? If it's a really big job, that helps with efficiency, but also not getting worn out. So I do have a couple other avenues there, but yeah, just keeping things kind of small. I like I've toyed with the idea of going and working for another company, but I really enjoy the flexibility that I have. Creating my own schedule. And really kind of choosing which jobs I want to take. Whether it's the size of the job or the client. Sometimes the client is just really demanding, and they want things done a certain way, and I want to do them what's the best for the tree, not what's best for the client. Sometimes there's a balance there, but um some people you can kind of tell pretty quickly that they're just going to be very difficult, or kind of standing out there watching the whole time, and it's not really conducive to a really efficient job process. So but fortunately I don't have a lot of those. So again, I'm able to choose the jobs that I want, and proximity to where I am makes it kind of nice, because if I'm just doing soil work, I can travel quite a bit farther than I would if I had to go and remove a large tree, because you've got to get the equipment there, you've got to figure out a dump site, there's just a lot more moving parts and all that. Whereas if
Yep.
I'm just going out and excavating or planting trees, it's very minimal materials, and it's really easy to serve a lot larger client base that way.
Yeah.
So that's another part of the efficiency and the kind of selectiveness for work. But yeah, a lot of it being small just comes down to the flexibility. Again, being able to just plan things as I want to, schedule things how I want to. I've got two kids, so I like to be able to, take a day off here and there, even in the middle of the week, and go do their school stuff or whatever it is. So it's nice to have that.
Yep.
Um, and doing
No,
soil work around here is a really niche thing, because there's only like three other companies that are really doing it, and so it's kind of it's a large market, but not very many of us serving it. So it's nice.
yeah. So in the summer, you're in a Speedo working on your tan in Hawaii, or what do you got going on in the summer?
No, I'm unfortunately still working. I would like to take the whole summer off and just work entirely through the winter, because I'm not a uh sunny person. I don't like the heat. I'd
Yes.
much rather be sitting in the AC during the summer, but I'm still working. It slows down a little bit, but there's still quite a bit to do. So yeah, like I said,
Is
I'd
that
rather
where
be
you do more
working
of the
through the winter.
soil work? You have some complementary services? Is that where the soil work kinda is complementary? You're able to do that in
Yeah,
the summer?
yeah, a lot of times doing excavations and things like that. We're just trying to help trees that are kind of struggling. And it's yeah, that can kind of buffer a lot of that, where I'm not doing as much pruning. But I still do a pretty fair share of pruning during the summer. It's all, again, small stuff, or just, little corrective pruning, or, somebody's got branches in their walkway, just, very, very small stuff like that. Little bits and pieces here and there kind of help keep me busy through the summer. But it stays pretty steady most of the year.
And you're doing most obviously fruit tree stuff early winter, spring, and then some kinda non-fruit tree pruning jobs more so in the summer, or is it just a
Yeah.
little bit of both?
Yeah, the goal with fruit trees is to kind of get them ready for the spring, once get them ready to start producing fruit. And so that's why there's kind of that window there. I do have a few fruit tree clients that I still prune in the summer. They're not so much interested in the production of the tree. They just kind of want the tree to be kind of contained and just kept looking nice. And if it produces, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. They're not that concerned with it. And so so I schedule those accordingly. If I've got somebody that's, really into getting heavy production on their trees, they kind of get priority in that, like January to March kind of time frame. And then from there I start getting into more just ornamentals, the smaller crab apples and things like that are just, they're fine to prune in the summer, not doing anything really heavy on them, nothing really significant that's going to stress them or anything like that. Um so yeah, it kind of evolves from fruit trees into ornamentals. and then from there it's just kind of as work kind of comes up. So I'm usually pretty well scheduled from about January until say June, and then things kind of slow down, and then it's just kind of you know hurry up and wait kind of thing.
Yep, yep,
um there are times where I'm waiting for the phone to ring, and other times I'm waiting for it to stop ringing.
sure,
So but yeah, it's a little up and down, but it's been treating me well. So
yep. And what percentage of your business is from referrals versus people finding you on Google?
I have a pretty high referral rate. I've got a lot of return clients. The again, the fruit tree clients, I've been doing many of them for the past several years. And then a lot of those, they'll refer me out to their neighbors, or a lot of times people will just see my truck on their street and they'll get my phone number off the side of the truck and give me a call. Um, so I mean, I would say, probably just throwing a number out, probably about 65 to 70% of my work is referrals. And then the rest is Facebook, or just kind of I have a pretty small online presence. Part of that's because I'm terrible about keeping up on it. Part of it's just because because of the referrals. I think that referrals are one of the best reviews you can have. Because I have seen so many times where people have, or I'll read really good referrals on, or really good like Google recommendations online, but I know the tree company, and I know that the work isn't really up to standards. It might have been really good work for the client, but I know that it's not ideally up to ISA or ANSI standards, and so there's kind of a disconnect there on what's good work and what just looks good.
Yep, yep.
So
Do you
so
find that
again,
the fruit tree kind of an ornamental clients are more sticky in terms of they're not price shopping? These trees are really important to them and they want someone they can trust and they don't want to just hire any tree trimmer for that.
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and part of that's going out and doing it one time, and then just following up and checking out how their fruit production was. If it was really good, they're usually really happy about bringing you back. If it wasn't real great, a lot of people that have had fruit trees for several years understand that sometimes there's just bad years. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with pruning or anything like that. It's watering, it's pollination, it's the weather, it's all these other things. And so a lot of it's just developing a rapport with the clients. But yeah, anytime that I get a call that, and I'm looking for 4 or 5 estimates on my work, I'm just kind of thinking, you're probably not going to choose me, because I'm not going to be the most expensive, but I'm not going to be your cheapest guy.
Yep.
Um,
Which is right
and
kind of
what's that?
where you want to be. Yeah, it's good
Yeah,
to
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And
Uh
I don't, I'll compete a little bit, but I'm not really into the mentality of hey, I'll beat anybody's price by 15% or anything like that. My price is my price, and and I don't feel like, I feel like I'm about middle of the road with a lot of the pricing. And you can definitely get work done cheaper, but again, it's kind of one of those things. Usually, you get what you pay for. And I've been to a few sites where they'll tell me, I had such and such company come out and they did work on my trees, and I just tell them, you unfortunately you got kind of a bad deal. You might have saved a lot of money, but your trees are struggling now. So, and then just trying to work with them on a plan to develop a better tree, and just work going forward from there. And oftentimes that helps to develop that better relationship to where you are coming back,
yep,
regularly, or they are referring you. So
yep. As a business owner, what's the biggest challenge that you've faced or some of the biggest challenges you faced up to this point?
being in kind of a niche market, that's kind of hard. When we start talking to clients about soil excavations and soil work and things like that, it's not something that's real cheap. It's not super expensive, but sometimes it can be something where they look at their tree and they say, my tree's been doing fine for 20 years. Why do you want to do this? And and then it becomes a bit more of kind of an educational thing. Going and doing soil samples and showing them what's actually going on in their soil. And that's the thing with trees and soil. They work on such a different timeline that we do, that it's, for one, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. You can make a really good guess. You can make a good educated guess as to what happens, but it's really hard to say definitively what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years from now, if we do or don't do this work. And so some people are really open to that if you kind of explain the science behind it to them. Um, and other people are, they're of that mindset that my tree's fine, I don't want to do this. And it's like, that's totally fine. I'm not a hardcore salesman. I don't try to push people. I basically say, this is the situation, this is what your soil looks like, this is how we can
Yep.
fix it. It's up to
Yeah.
you to decide if you want to do that now.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that can be kind of one of the hardest things.
Yeah. Um, being that you kind of niche down into, a certain segment, how have, you handled referral partnerships with other, tree trimmers, and has that been a mutually beneficial relationship? And
It has. I've been fortunate again to work with several companies that are very open to learning new things about how trees interact with soil and water, and they'll go out and do the pruning on a big tree, but then they'll refer me if they feel like there's a soil situation to deal with. So that's been really nice, and I've been on other jobs where somebody calls me because their tree's kind of struggling, and we talk about the soil and things like that. But then I tell them, your tree could use some work, and I've got a couple of really good companies for you. So yeah, there is that kind of a revolving door of referrals between companies, which is really nice. Um, and yeah, that helps grow both of our businesses. It's mutually beneficial, and we're both learning from each other in the process. I do have a couple of companies that they'll call me and they'll send me a picture and say, what do you think about this, or um, what's is there a remedy here? And I'll say, yeah, if you want, I can go out and talk to the client, and we can look at doing this type of work. And then the client is really happy too, because people usually like, if you go out and talk to them about one thing and they've got a question about another, they really like if you can give them a referral for other work, rather than just saying, you need to have this done, but I don't know what to tell you, I don't know how to go about getting it done. People in general like answers, now or soon. It's kind of like, a client asking me what's going on with my tree and I don't know. I'll just tell them I don't know, but I'll find out, and I'll reach out to one of the other people in the valley that's really good with bugs or diseases, and get them an answer in a few days. And they really, people really like responsiveness. Um, and it's I think that I'm finding that a lot of people are like me, where they'd rather somebody tell them I don't know than be told some story about something that's not actually happening. I know I would. I'd rather somebody just didn't know the answer than to tell me something ridiculous and try to kind of bilk more money out of me over something that's not going to fix the problem.
exactly. So what exactly is, the process of soil excavation, and when does someone know that they, need to amend their soil health and go about that? And how do you bring that conversation up, and initiate that?
Well, a lot of times you can tell, a lot of companies, when they get called to go out and look at a tree, they're looking up at the canopy of the tree, and they're looking at the pruning aspect of it, which is what they do. But you can go and look at the base of a tree, and if it looks like a utility pole, then it's got too much soil around the base of it. And so that's where we start kind of talking about doing a what's called a root collar excavation. And it's using a tool called an air spade or an air knife. And it's just a high pressure pneumatic tool hooked up to a compressor, like you would see that they use to blow out sprinklers. And it's just a process of blowing out that soil and finding that root collar, and seeing if there's any, we're looking for soil compaction, and we're looking for soil that's above the root collar, which is basically where the trunk develops into the root system. We want to see that above grade. And so when that's surrounded by soil or turf or landscape fabric, or we see a lot of, I don't know how it is around your area, but a lot of they call it permabark, but it's just a rock, a landscape rock. It's usually like a black basalt or something like that. And all of those things kind of combined can just detract from a tree's health. Um, Another way is if I'm walking through the yard and it feels like I'm walking on concrete. That's usually a good indicator their soil is really compacted, really hard. Trees roots are pretty amazing structures, and they'll burrow through a lot of difficult soil, but kind of so much is, or there's such a thing as too much compaction, and
Yes.
it can just cause a lot of root decline, and there's lack of water getting down there and things like that, and so roots need nutrients, water, and oxygen, and if there's a surplus or a deficit of any of those, it can be pretty detrimental. So then again, still using that airspace to basically um, penetrate into the soil and just kind of break up a lot of that really hard compacted stuff, and then putting compost back in to liven up the soil and just allow more water filtration and things like that. So there's kind of a
So
lot of visual
does
things.
that create kind of like a divot there? You get rid of some of that soil, and does that help get more water in because it's kinda a
Well,
basin? Or is that can you
around
have
the
too much
tree.
water, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, around the base of the tree, we don't want a lot of water just kind of residing there because it can lead to trunk rot, which can occur if there's too much soil there as well. If that soil is just sitting there and it's just collecting water and the water's not moving anywhere, it's not being used by the roots, or it's just sitting for long periods, you can start getting trunk rot, or other diseases can set in and things like that. And so, yeah, it does sometimes create kind of a bowl around the tree. Try to work with that as far as, not just going straight down with the excavation, but kind of creating a gradual slope towards the tree and then backfilling that with mulch. Um, it's a lot more, just a lot better kind of habitat for the tree to have that mulch there. But also, that mulch is going to degrade and feed the soil and all the microbes and everything in the soil, and again just kind of provide a better environment for those roots. Um, the the goal is to not have a lot of material at all up against the trunk of the tree, whether it's turf or mulch or anything like that. All those things can detract from the general health of the tree.
Interesting, very interesting. Cool. Oh, where are you looking at now? Where's the business? What are your goals for the business? What are the current challenges you're facing? And yeah, what does the future, um, of Kite in a Tree look like here?
Well, kiting a tree is still going to be, a pretty productive physical part of my life for probably several more years. I want to keep the clientele I can as long as I can. Keep doing work for them and getting referrals from them. I would like to evolve my second business a lot more, and kind of be my retirement plan where I'm just going and doing talks and education and classes for people. I do a pruning class for our city. The city puts on a horticulture series where they have a 7 or 8 classes that are just open to the public. It's pruning and gardening and fruit trees and tree biology and things like that. So I'd like to continue doing things like that, and eventually kind of, probably, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years from now, really step away from the physical side and get a lot more into the educational side. But the process of doing that is really starting small, just doing small classes here and there, kind of spreading the word, but spreading my name as well. And so that is kind of a challenge because there's still a lot of old and or bad information as far as tree care goes out there, and it can be hard to break somebody of those habits. It can be hard to introduce a new idea. And the really nice thing is that I haven't had to go through and do all this research. I've been fortunate enough that there are a ton of people out there doing all this research for the past 50, 60 years. And all I have to do is read it and, kind of investigate it a little, and then, present that to whoever I'm doing the class for. And sometimes it's received well, and sometimes I get, well, I've been doing this for 30 years and I'm going to keep doing it this way.
Sure,
And so
sure.
that can be kind of a challenge. But, if you reach a couple of people in a group of 20, then that's great. I mean, it's a step forward at least.
Yep. I always ask kind of what are the, pearls of wisdom that you want to share with the community, and yeah, from your background as an educator, that might be especially interesting. So what is it out there? Maybe other business owners or homeowners, or what do you want to share with people coming up in the trades, or any kind of final thoughts and words of wisdom you want to impart?
As far as people coming up through, I would just say, one of the best pieces of advice that I've received is as soon as you think you know everything there is to know about a particular thing, you should probably open up another book. Because there's just always something else to learn, something newer, some new research, some new method of doing something that's going to be more beneficial. So we're still learning about trees. Even after all these years, we're still figuring out how they work. We still don't completely understand them. They're ever evolving, ever growing, and so I feel like if we haven't figured out the human body yet, we certainly haven't figured out the tree yet. So yeah, just keep reading, keep learning more stuff. Never feel like you're the best one at what you do. As far as the public, I would say, really getting involved with either master gardener classes or checking into your city parks and rec and just see if they offer any kind of classes for basic tree care, and if they don't, maybe asking them to or kind of pushing them to. 'Cause I think that the more community involvement there is in any industry, for one, you get better practitioners because you're kind of held under a microscope a bit more. Um, if your clients are better educated, then they're going to ask better questions. They're going to have a better conversation with whoever's providing that service. Um, and business owners, I would just say one of the big things is just really encourage your guys to progress and get to the next level and learn more and go to classes. And it's an expense, but it's an investment. If you spend money on your employees, they're 9 times out of 10 they're going to recognize that as a value and they're going to want to stick around. They might not be getting paid the best, but if they've got a really good work environment and they feel like they're valued and they're allowed to progress, then they're going to stick around a lot longer.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. I think that's that abundant, mentality that you learned from your, previous boss that, yeah, is, you know, something that's maybe not straightforward and intuitive, but, is one of those laws of the universe. Yeah. Very cool. Jake, awesome having you on. Really cool learning about your business. And, yeah, if people want to find you, connect you, you said you're active on Facebook, Kite in a Tree as well, Boise, Idaho. Anywhere else people can find you or connect with you about classes?
Through the City of Boise website, they can get on there and look at when those classes are. We've got one coming up actually this Wednesday is a pruning class I'm doing. And then there's going to be another one on understanding ANSI standards. It's kind of a dry topic, but it's pretty important for people to understand and have that better educated conversation with a tree care provider. And it's a publication that you do have to pay for, but that's why I like to kind of spread it to these classes as much as I can to let them know it's out there.
Yep.
Even if they don't sit down and read it or buy it, at least they're aware that it exists. Um, and then yeah, getting on to the even becoming a member of the ISA, you don't have to have any credentials or anything like that. The International Society of Arboriculture, you can just become a member and get publications from them for a little bit cheaper than paying for it as a non-member. So that's a really good resource. They have a lot of free webinars and things like that, and there's an abundance of information out there. You just got to sit down and look for it.
Cool. Awesome. Good stuff, Jake. Cool
All
guy.
right. Thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it.
Inspiring me to work on my step up my beard game as well.
There you go. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, you've
yeah.
got me beat up top though, so you
Hey,
got me
there
there.
we go. Yeah, yeah. Cool. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.